The crack of gunfire echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption, Arizona Territory, 1875. As Zachariah Dawson ducked behind an overturned water trough, the bullet missing his head by mere inches. His heart pounded against his ribs like a wild Mustang as he checked his revolver, 3 bullets left and 5 outlaws still standing. "You've made a mighty big mistake comin' back here, Dawson," hollered Jeb Tucker, the self-proclaimed leader of the group that had been terrorizing the small mining town for months. "This time there ain't no running away," Zachariah, known throughout the territory simply as Zach, closed his eyes briefly, steadying his breathing. 6 years as a Texas Ranger had taught him how to handle himself in a gunfight, but even he had to admit the odds weren't in his favor today. Not after riding 3 days straight with barely any sleep, chasing rumors that had led him back to this God-forsaken town. "Last chance, Tucker." Zach shouted back, his voice carrying across the deserted Main Street. The townsfolk had scattered at the first sign of trouble, leaving nothing but tumbleweed and tension between the men. "Throw down your weapons and surrender, the law's coming either way." The response was another volley of bullets splintering the wooden trough. "Law," Tucker laughed, a sound like gravel being crushed. "Ain't no law for 50 miles, Ranger, and when we're done with you, they'll find nothing but buzzard pickings." Zach knew they were right about one thing: help wasn't coming. He was alone out here, a fact that hadn't bothered him much over the years. Not since Sarah died. Not since he'd buried his heart alongside her and their unborn child 3 winters ago. Drawing a deep breath, he prepared to make his move. 3 bullets, 5 men, he'd faced worse odds. Maybe the sound of a rifle cocking from somewhere above made him freeze. Had one of Tucker's men circled around to the rooftops, a shot rang out, followed by a cry of pain. Then another shot. And another, 3 precise shots from a vantage point Zach couldn't see. 3 of Tucker's men collapsed to the dirt, wounded but alive, clutching their shooting arms or shoulders. What the devil? Tucker spun around, searching for the new threat. Zach didn't waste the opportunity. He leaped from his cover, firing 2 quick shots that disarmed the remaining outlaws, including Tucker himself. "Don't move," he ordered, keeping his final bullet ready as he approached the stunned men. "Up there." Tucker's remaining companion gasped, pointing toward the second-story window of the mercantile. Standing in the window with a Winchester rifle was a woman Zach had never seen before. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and even from this distance, he could see the determined set of her jaw. She wore men's trousers and a button-down shirt that had seen better days, but she handled that rifle like it was an extension of herself. "I believe you boys were making quite a racket," she called down, her voice carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. "Some of us are trying to conduct business." "Madam," Zach tipped his hat, never taking his eyes off the outlaws. "Much obliged for the assistance." "Don't mention it," she replied, rifle still trained on Tucker and his men. "These particular gentlemen have been a nuisance since I arrived last week." With the unexpected help, Zach managed to disarm and bind all 5 outlaws. The town's reluctant sheriff eventually emerged from the saloon, along with several townspeople who'd been hiding. "I'll take them from here, Dawson," Sheriff Miller said, though he looked none too pleased about having to do his job. "Though what brings a former ranger all the way to Redemption is beyond me." Zach ignored the question, turning instead to look for the woman who'd helped him. She had descended from the mercantile and now stood at the edge of the gathered crowd, the Winchester still in her hands. "Miss." Zach began, approaching her with his hat in his hands. "Olivia Tate," she supplied, extending her hand in a decidedly unladylike fashion. "Owner of Tate Mercantile." Zach took her hand, surprised by the firmness of her grip. "Zachariah Dawson, former Texas Ranger." "Former." Her eyebrow arched with curiosity. "Yes, madam. Turned in my badge 6 months ago." She studied him with intelligent hazel eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "Yet you're still chasing outlaws." "Just these particular outlaws," Zach corrected. "They have something that belongs to me." Olivia Tate nodded slowly, seeming to understand there was more to the story. "Well, Mr. Dawson, it seems you could use a hot meal and perhaps a place to clean up. My establishment has rooms for rent above the store, and I was just about to close up for supper. Zach hesitated. He hadn't planned on staying in Redemption longer than necessary to capture Tucker and his gang, but the prospect of a meal that wasn't trail jerky and a bed that wasn't hard ground was tempting. I wouldn't want to impose, Miss Tate. It's not an imposition if you're paying, she replied with a practical smile. And please call me Olivia. Miss Tate makes me feel like a schoolmarm. There was something refreshing about her directness. Zach found himself nodding. Then I accept your offer, Olivia. The mercantile was unlike any Zach had seen in his travels throughout the West. Rather than the typical jumble of goods piled haphazardly, everything was meticulously organized. Tools hung on one wall, fabric and clothing on another. Glass-fronted cabinets displayed finer goods watches, jewelry, and small luxuries that seemed out of place in a frontier town. You've done well with this place, Zach observed as Olivia locked the front door behind them. I inherited it from my uncle, she explained, moving behind the counter to retrieve a ledger. He built it up over 20 years, but when he passed last winter, there was no one else to take it over. I was teaching in Boston at the time, quite a change from Boston to Arizona territory. Olivia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious face. You have no idea, but Uncle Edward was my only family and he left me everything. I couldn't bear to sell it without at least trying to make a go of it myself. As she spoke, she led him to a narrow staircase at the back of the store. The upstairs consisted of a small sitting room, a kitchen, and 3 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. The room on the far left is available, she said. There's a washroom at the end of the hall with a pump. I can heat some water for you while you get settled. That's mighty kind, Zach replied, suddenly very aware of the dust coating him from his 3-day ride. It's practical, Olivia corrected him. I don't allow muddy boots at my dinner table. Despite her businesslike tone, there was a warmth to her eyes that told Zach she wasn't as stern as she pretended. He found himself curious about this Eastern schoolteacher who had abandoned civilization for the frontier and who could handle a Winchester with such precision. The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window overlooking the main street. Zach set his saddlebags on the floor and placed his gun belt carefully on the bedside table within easy reach. Old habits died hard. After washing up and changing into his spare shirt, Zach joined Olivia in the kitchen. The aroma of stew filled the small space, making his stomach growl in anticipation. Have a seat, she instructed, gesturing to the table already set for 2. It's just venison stew and biscuits, nothing fancy. After trail rations, anything hot is fancy, Zach assured her. As they ate, conversation flowed more easily than Zach would have expected. Olivia was well-read and opinionated, talking about everything from the territorial politics to the latest books she'd ordered from back east. She was curious about his past as a ranger, but didn't pry when he kept his answers brief. So, she said finally, as they finished the meal, are you going to tell me what Tucker and his men have that's so important you'd track them across the territory? Zach hesitated, turning his coffee cup in his hands. He wasn't in the habit of sharing his personal business, but Olivia had saved his life today. She deserved some kind of explanation. They robbed a stagecoach 3 months back, he said finally, near El Paso. Among the items they took was a pocket watch, gold with an engraving of a falcon on the cover. A family heirloom, Olivia guessed, something like that. Zach's voice tightened. It belonged to my father. He was killed when I was 14. That watch is all I have left of him. Olivia's expression softened. I'm sorry, Zachariah. I understand why you chased them so far. I wasn't fast enough to stop them at the time, he continued. I'd been tracking them for weeks when I got word they were headed to Redemption. Seems they've been causing trouble all over. They certainly have here, Olivia confirmed. Sheriff Miller is less than enthusiastic about enforcing the law. Tucker's gang has been demanding protection money from the businesses in town. Most have paid. I refused. Zach's brow furrowed. That explains why they were so eager to shoot at me today. They probably thought I was here about their extortion scheme. Will you be leaving now that you've caught them? Olivia asked, her tone carefully neutral. Not until I get my father's watch back, Zach replied. And maybe not right away even then. Sounds like this town could use someone to help clean it up a bit. A small smile played at the corners of Olivia's mouth. Are you offering your services, Mr. Dawson? Maybe I am, Miss Tate. Their eyes met across the table, and for the first time in years, Zach felt something other than the cold determination that had driven him since Sarah's death. It was a dangerous feeling, one he wasn't sure he was ready for. But as he helped Olivia clear the dishes, he knew he wouldn't be riding out of redemption as quickly as he'd planned. The next morning found Zach at the sheriff's office, where Tucker and his men were locked in the town's small jail. I want to talk to Tucker, Zach told Sheriff Miller, who looked like he'd spent the night in a whiskey bottle. Suit yourself, Miller grumbled, handing over the keys to the cell. Just don't kill him, paperwork's a nuisance. Tucker sat on the edge of the cot, his face dark with anger when he saw Zach. Come to gloat, Ranger. Not a ranger anymore, Zach corrected. And I'm not here to gloat, I'm here for my father's watch, the one you took off that stagecoach outside El Paso. Tucker's expression shifted to calculation. Don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, Zach replied, keeping his voice level. Gold pocket watch with a falcon engraved on it. Hand it over, and maybe I'll put in a good word with the territorial judge. A slow, ugly smile spread across Tucker's face. Oh, that watch. Yeah, I remember now. Sold it weeks ago to a gambler in Tucson. Said it'd make a fine gift for his lady friend. Zach's stomach tightened. You're lying. Am I? Tucker stood, approaching the bars. Why would I keep some trinket when it could buy me whiskey and women? Face it, Dawson, you came all this way for nothing. It took every ounce of Zach's self-control not to reach through the bars and throttle the man. If I find out you're lying. You'll what? Tucker sneered. Kill me. Go ahead, they'll hang me anyway for the stagecoach robbery. One more dead passenger don't make much difference to the judge. Zach froze. What dead passenger? Tucker's smile widened. Oh, didn't you know? Old man put up a fight when we were taking his valuables, caught a bullet for his trouble. The revelation hit Zach like a physical blow. He'd known about the robbery, had been tracking the gang because of his father's watch, but he hadn't known there had been a death. The stagecoach company had reported only injuries when he'd inquired. His name, Zach demanded, his voice deadly quiet. What was his name? Tucker shrugged. Never asked, just some old-timer with more courage than sense. Zach turned and walked out without another word, ignoring Tucker's taunting laughter behind him. Outside, he took several deep breaths of the morning air, trying to steady himself. Bad news. Olivia's voice startled him. She stood a few feet away, a basket of supplies on her arm. He says he sold the watch weeks ago, Zach admitted. And that they killed a passenger during the robbery, I didn't know about that part. Olivia's expression turned thoughtful. Do you believe him? About selling the watch, Zach considered this. No, men like Tucker don't part with valuable items easily, especially when they might need them for bargaining later. He's probably got it stashed somewhere, or one of his men does, Olivia suggested. They're not exactly the trustworthy type, even among themselves. You're right, Zach nodded. I need to search their camp. They must have set up somewhere outside of town. I might be able to help with that, Olivia offered. One of my customers, a rancher named Fletcher, mentioned seeing smoke from a campfire in the foothills north of his property. Said he steered clear because he suspected it was Tucker's men. Can you show me where his ranch is? Olivia hesitated only briefly. I can do better than that. I can take you there. I need to deliver these supplies to Mrs. Fletcher anyway. She gestured to her basket. It could be dangerous, Zach warned. The look Olivia gave him was both amused and challenging. Mr. Dawson, I believe I've already demonstrated I can handle myself in dangerous situations, unless you'd prefer to wander the foothills alone for days. He couldn't argue with that logic. We'll leave within the hour. I need to speak with the telegraph operator first, see if I can get confirmation about that stagecoach passenger. True to her word, Olivia was ready within the hour. She had changed into riding clothes, practical trousers, a sturdy shirt, and a leather vest. Her hair was braided and tucked under a wide-brimmed hat, and the Winchester was secured to her saddle. You ride like you were born to it, Zach observed as they made their way out of town on the northern trail. Olivia sat straight and confident on her chestnut mare. Uncle Edward insisted I learn when I visited during summers as a girl, she explained. Said no niece of his was going to be one of those delicate eastern flowers who couldn't handle herself in the real world. Sounds like a wise man. He was, Olivia agreed, a hint of sadness in her voice. I wish you could have met him, he would have liked you. What makes you say that? She glanced over at him, a small smile playing on her lips. He had a fondness for stubborn men with a strong sense of justice. Zach couldn't help returning her smile. I'm taking that as a compliment. As you should. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the landscape around them changing from the flat, dusty surroundings of the town to rockier terrain with scattered juniper trees and sagebrush. The Fletcher Ranch was nestled in a small valley about 5 miles from Redemption, a modest but well-maintained homestead with a main house, a barn, and several corrals for livestock. Mrs. Fletcher, a round-faced woman with graying hair, greeted them warmly. Miss Tate, so good to see you. And you've brought a friend. This is Mr. Dawson, Olivia introduced him. He's helping the sheriff with the Tucker gang. Mrs. Fletcher's expression turned serious. About time someone did something about those ruffians. They've been terrorizing the whole county for months. Stole 2 of our best horses just last week. I'm sorry to hear that, madam, Zach said. We're hoping to locate their camp. Your husband mentioned seeing smoke in the foothills. Yes, indeed. Jacob, she called toward the barn, come show these folks where you saw that campfire. Jacob Fletcher, a weathered man in his 50s, emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. After introductions were made, he led them to a rise behind the house. See that ridge there? He pointed to a rocky outcropping about 2 miles to the north. Just beyond that, there's a small canyon with a spring. Good place to hide out. Saw smoke rising from there 3 evenings in a row. Much obliged, Zach said, studying the terrain. Best if you and the missus stay close to home for a few days. Those men have friends who might still be out there. Fletcher nodded grimly. Don't you worry, got my shotgun loaded and ready. After sharing a meal with the Fletchers, Zach and Olivia set out toward the ridge. Zach had tried to convince her to return to town, but she'd flatly refused. I'm not asking permission, Zachariah, she'd stated firmly. I'm coming with you. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, and I know this area better than you do. Now, as they approached the ridge, Zach had to admit her presence was reassuring. She moved quietly and stayed alert, clearly taking the potential danger seriously. They left their horses in a sheltered spot and continued on foot, moving carefully through the rocky terrain. As they crested the ridge, Zach held up a hand, signaling Olivia to stop. Below them, in the small canyon Fletcher had described, was evidence of a recently abandoned camp. Ashes from a fire, trampled grass, and discarded items scattered around. Looks like they left in a hurry, Olivia whispered. Zach nodded. Probably after Tucker and the others were captured. Let's check it carefully. If the watch is here, it'll likely be hidden. They descended into the canyon, alert for any signs of remaining gang members. The camp was indeed deserted, with evidence that 5 or 6 men had been living there for at least a couple of weeks. Look for anything that might serve as a hiding place, Zach instructed. Hollow trees, piles of rocks, disturbed soil. They searched methodically for over an hour, finding nothing but trash and a few worthless items the gang had left behind. Zach's frustration mounted with each passing minute. Zachariah, Olivia called from where she was examining a fallen log. I think I found something. He hurried over to find her pointing to a small cavity in the underside of the log. Reaching in carefully, Zach felt around until his fingers touched something metal. He pulled out a small leather pouch. His heart racing, he opened it and tipped the contents into his palm. Several gold coins, a lady's pearl earring, and a man's wedding band tumbled out, but no pocket watch. More stolen goods, he said, trying to hide his disappointment. But not what I'm looking for. Olivia placed a gentle hand on his arm. We'll keep looking. They continued their search as the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon. Zach was about to suggest they head back before dark when Olivia gave a triumphant cry. Zachariah, over here. She was kneeling beside what appeared to be a freshly dug hole beneath a juniper tree. As Zach approached, she held up a small tin box. It was buried here, not very deep. With hands that suddenly felt unsteady, Zach took the box from her and opened it. Inside, nestled on a dirty handkerchief, was his father's gold pocket watch. The falcon engraving on the cover caught the light as he lifted it reverently. "Is this it?" Olivia asked softly. Zach nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He opened the watch, revealing the familiar inscription inside. "To James Dawson, time is precious, but family more so." "It's beautiful," Olivia said. "My mother saved for years to buy it for him," Zach explained, his voice rough with emotion. "He never went anywhere without it. When he was killed, the men who did it took the watch. I was just a boy then, but I swore I'd get it back someday. Then it turned up in that stagecoach robbery." Olivia's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The passenger who was killed. You think it might have been the man who originally took the watch from your father?" "It's possible," Zach admitted. "I need to find out who he was." As they made their way back to their horses, a sense of unease crept over Zach. The camp had been abandoned too hastily, with valuable items left behind. It wasn't like outlaws to leave loot, even in their hurry to escape. "We should get back to town before dark," he said, helping Olivia onto her horse. "Something doesn't feel right." They rode quickly, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. Zach kept one hand near his revolver, scanning the terrain for any sign of movement. They were about halfway back to Redemption when the crack of a rifle shot split the air. Zach's horse reared in panic as dirt kicked up just inches from its hooves. "Ride," he shouted to Olivia, drawing his gun as another shot rang out from a rocky outcrop to their left. Olivia didn't hesitate, spurring her horse forward as Zach provided covering fire. They galloped across the open ground, bullets whizzing past them until they reached the cover of a dry creek bed. "Stay down," Zach commanded, dismounting and pulling Olivia behind the shelter of the bank. Their horses, trained to ground tie, stood nervously nearby. "How many?" Olivia asked, already reaching for her Winchester. "At least 2, maybe 3, Zach replied, peering carefully over the edge of the bank. "Must be the rest of Tucker's gang." Another volley of shots kicked up dirt along the edge of their shelter. Olivia calmly took aim with her rifle and fired back, forcing one of their attackers to duck behind a boulder. "Not bad," Zach murmured, impressed once again by her steadiness under fire. "I had a good teacher," she replied. "Uncle Edward believed every woman should know how to defend herself." They exchanged fire with the outlaws for several minutes, neither side gaining an advantage. The sun was sinking fast, and Zach knew they needed to make a move before darkness fell. "We're pinned down here," he said. "Once it's dark, they'll try to circle around behind us." Olivia nodded grimly. "What do you suggest?" Zach scanned the terrain, looking for options. About 50 yards to their right, a cluster of large boulders offered better protection and a potential route back toward town. "See those rocks?" he pointed. "If we can make it there, we'll have a better position and a way out." "That's a lot of open ground to cover," Olivia observed. "I'll go first and provide covering fire. When I signal, you run for it. Don't stop no matter what happens." Olivia met his gaze, her expression resolute. "We go together or not at all." "This isn't a debate, Olivia." "You're right, it's not," she replied firmly. "I'm not leaving you to face them alone. We'll create a diversion and both make a run for it." Before Zach could argue further, she untied her neckerchief and secured it to the end of a fallen branch. "When I raise this over the edge, they'll fire at it," she explained. "That's when we both run." Zach had to admire her quick thinking. "All right, but stay close to me." Olivia raised the makeshift decoy, and as predicted, the outlaws opened fire on it immediately. In that moment, Zach grabbed Olivia's hand and they sprinted toward the boulders. They were halfway there when one of the outlaws spotted them. A bullet whistled past Zach's ear, so close he felt the air disturbed by its passage. Another struck the ground at Olivia's feet, making her stumble. Zach caught her before she fell, practically carrying her the last few yards to safety. Behind the boulders, they both gasped for breath. Zach checked Olivia quickly for injuries. "Are you hit?" "No," she assured him. "Just lost my footing." From their new position, they had a better angle on their attackers. Zach counted 3 men using the rocks on the hillside for cover. "We need to hold them off until dark," he told Olivia. "Then we can slip away along that ravine to the east." As if in answer to his words, the sound of approaching horses reached them, many horses, moving fast. "That's not good," Zach muttered, thinking more of Tucker's gang had arrived. But instead of more outlaws, it was Sheriff Miller leading a posse of townsmen that came into view. The outlaws, seeing themselves outnumbered, attempted to flee but were quickly surrounded. "You two all right?" Miller called as they emerged from behind the boulders. "We're fine," Zach answered. "How did you know we were in trouble?" "Telegraph came in from Fort Bowie," Miller explained. "Said Tucker and his gang were wanted for murder, not just robbery. When I went to tell you, the livery boy said you'd ridden out with Miss Tate. Figured I'd better round up some men and follow, just in case." For once, Zach was grateful for the sheriff's intervention. "Much obliged." As the posse secured the 3 outlaws, one of them, a rangy man with a scar across his cheek, spat on the ground. "Should have killed you when we had the chance, Dawson. Now you'll make sure we all hang." "You did that yourselves when you murdered that passenger," Zach replied coldly. The man's face twisted into an ugly smile. "Old man never should have fought back, but he sure did squeal when he recognized me. 'You're James Dawson's killer,' he said, like I was supposed to remember every man I ever shot." Zach went very still. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," the outlaw taunted. "Your pa's watch came full circle, didn't it? The man who took it off your daddy's dead body ended up on that stagecoach, and now he's dead too." In 3 quick strides, Zach crossed the distance between them and seized the man by his shirt front. "You killed my father." "Cole, shut your mouth," one of the other captured outlaws hissed, but Cole seemed beyond caring. 20 years ago, outside of El Paso, him and some other rancher, they fought back when we tried to take their cattle. Your pa pulled that fancy watch out to check the time just before I shot him. Always was a lucky piece for me." It took both Sheriff Miller and Olivia to pull Zach away from the man before he could do something he'd regret. "He's not worth it," Olivia said firmly, her hands gripping Zach's arms. "Let the law handle him." Breathing hard, Zach stepped back. The circle was complete now. 20 years of wondering who had killed his father, and now he knew. It should have brought him peace, but all he felt was a hollow ache in his chest. "The Telegraph said they're wanted for a string of murders across 3 territories," Sheriff Miller told him as they rode back to town. "They'll hang for sure this time." Zach nodded, his hand going to the pocket watch now safely tucked in his vest. Justice would be served, but it didn't change the past. His father was still gone. As if sensing his thoughts, Olivia rode closer, her shoulder briefly touching his. "You found the watch," she said quietly, "and you found the truth. That counts for something." In the fading light, her face was both beautiful and strong. Zach realized with a start that in the short time he'd known her, Olivia Tate had come to mean something to him. "Yes," he agreed, "I suppose it does." Back in Redemption, the town was abuzz with the news of the capture of the rest of Tucker's gang. Zach found himself treated as a hero, with people stopping him on the street to shake his hand or offer their thanks. It was a strange feeling for a man who had spent so long on his own. The following morning, he sat with Olivia at breakfast in her kitchen above the mercantile. The events of the previous day had created a bond between them, a shared experience that had somehow bridged the gap between strangers and, whatever they were becoming. "What will you do now?" Olivia asked, pouring him a cup of coffee. "Now that you've found the watch and the men responsible for your father's death," it was a question Zach had been asking himself all night. For years, the search for his father's watch had given him purpose, a reason to keep moving forward after Sarah's death. Now that it was over, he felt adrift. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "I haven't stayed in one place for long since I left the Rangers." Olivia studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "Why did you leave them, if you don't mind my asking?" Zach hesitated. He rarely spoke of Sarah, but something about Olivia made him want to share the burden he'd carried alone for so long. "I was married," he said finally. "Her name was Sarah. She died in childbirth 3 years ago along with our son. I couldn't." I couldn't stay in the same place after that, too many memories. Olivia's hand reached across the table to cover his. I'm so sorry, Zachariah. The Rangers were understanding, gave me time. But eventually I had to admit I wasn't the same man anymore, so I turned in my badge and started drifting. That's when I heard about Tucker's gang having my father's watch. And now that quest is complete, Olivia said softly. Zach nodded, acutely aware of the warmth of her hand on his. Now I need to figure out what comes next. Before Olivia could respond, a commotion from the street below drew their attention. Shouts and the sound of running feet sent them both to the window. A young boy was racing down the main street, yelling at the top of his lungs. Fire! Fire at the jail! Smoke was already visible, billowing from the small wooden building that served as the sheriff's office and jail. Without hesitation, Zach grabbed his gun, belt, and hat. Stay here, he told Olivia, already heading for the stairs. Predictably, she ignored him, following close behind. Those men are my responsibility too. I helped capture them. The scene at the jail was chaos. Flames licked up the back wall of the building, and townspeople were forming a bucket brigade from the water trough. Sheriff Miller was coughing in the street, his face blackened with soot. What happened? Zach demanded, grabbing the sheriff's arm. Someone threw a torch through the back window, Miller gasped. Caught the straw bedding on fire. I got out, but the prisoners. Zach didn't wait to hear more. Without thinking, he pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth and ran toward the burning building. Zachariah! Olivia's cry followed him, but he was already pushing through the door into the smoke-filled interior. The heat was intense, the smoke blinding. Zach dropped to a crouch where the air was marginally clearer and made his way to the cells at the back. Through watering eyes, he could see the 8 men inside, pressed against the bars, coughing and shouting for help. Keys! Zach shouted to Miller, who had followed him inside. Where are the keys? On my desk, the sheriff called back, breaking into another fit of coughing. The desk was already beginning to burn, but Zach spotted the ring of keys hanging from a nail on the wall nearby. He grabbed them just as a section of the ceiling collapsed behind him, sending up a shower of sparks. At the cells, Zach's hands shook as he tried key after key in the lock. Finally, the tumbler turned and the door swung open. Move, he ordered the prisoners, herding them toward the exit. Stay low and follow the sheriff. Tucker was the last in line, his face a mask of disbelief. Why are you helping us? You want us to hang? I want justice, Zach corrected him, shoving him toward the door as another section of the roof groaned ominously. Not a massacre. They had almost reached the exit when a burning beam crashed down, blocking their path. Tucker stumbled back, nearly knocking Zach over. The outlaw's panic was evident as he realized they were trapped. There's another way, Zach shouted over the roar of the flames. The window in the sheriff's office. The window was small, but it was their only chance. Zach used his gun butt to clear the remaining glass, then boosted Tucker through the opening. As the outlaw disappeared, Zach turned to follow, but a sudden cracking sound from above made him look up just as the entire roof began to give way. He lunged for the window, knowing he wasn't going to make it in time. Then, impossibly, hands reached in and grabbed him, pulling with surprising strength. Zach tumbled through the opening just as the roof collapsed behind him, sending a plume of fire and smoke into the sky. He landed hard on the ground outside, gasping for breath. Above him, Olivia's face came into focus, streaked with soot but determined. You stubborn, reckless man, she was saying, her voice breaking slightly. What were you thinking? Before he could answer, she was helping him to his feet and away from the burning building. The prisoners were all accounted for, being guarded by townsmen with shotguns while others continued to fight the fire. You saved them, Olivia said when they were a safe distance away. All of them. Zach looked back at the jail, now fully engulfed in flames. Seems someone didn't want them to stand trial. Sheriff Miller approached, his expression grim. One of Tucker's men just confessed, said they've been working for a man named Blackwood, some big rancher from up north who's been trying to buy up all the land around here. Tucker and his boys were supposed to scare off the small ranchers. And the fire? Zach asked. Blackwood's men, most likely, trying to silence Tucker before he could talk. Zach exchanged a look with Olivia. The situation was bigger than they had realized. It wasn't just about a gang of outlaws anymore, it was about someone with power trying to take control of the entire area. "We need to get these men somewhere secure," Zach said. "And then we need to find out more about this Blackwood." Over the next few days, Redemption buzzed with activity. The prisoners were temporarily housed in the storeroom of the bank, the only building in town with a proper safe and thick walls. Telegrams went back and forth to the territorial capital, requesting assistance from the marshal's office. Zach found himself increasingly involved in the town's affairs, working with Sheriff Miller to maintain order and investigate the connection between Tucker's gang and the mysterious Blackwood. Olivia's mercantile became an unofficial headquarters, with her keeping records and helping to coordinate the townspeople's efforts. "You're good at this," Zach observed one evening as they sat reviewing notes at her kitchen table. "Organizing people, keeping everything straight." Olivia smiled. "I was a school teacher, remember? Managing 30 children requires considerable organizational skills." "Do you miss it?" "Teaching," she considered the question thoughtfully. "Sometimes I miss the children, their eagerness to learn, but there's something satisfying about what I'm doing now, too. Building something of my own, making a difference here." Zach nodded, understanding. "You've certainly made a difference to this town and to me." Their eyes met, and the air between them seemed to thicken. Over the past week, they had fallen into an easy partnership, working together during the day and sharing meals in the evening. Zach found himself looking forward to those quiet moments when it was just the two of them discussing the day's events or sharing stories from their pasts. "Zachariah," Olivia began, her voice soft. A pounding on the door downstairs interrupted whatever she had been about to say. They exchanged concerned glances before hurrying down to the mercantile. Jacob Fletcher stood on the doorstep, his face ashen in the lamplight. "Miss Tate, Mr. Dawson, they've taken my wife." "Who has?" Zach demanded, ushering the rancher inside. "Blackwood's men," Fletcher spat the name like a curse. "4 of them showed up at our place just after sundown. Said if I didn't sign over my land, they'd take Martha somewhere I'd never find her." Olivia's hand went to her mouth. "Oh, Jacob, did you sign?" "No," Fletcher said, his voice breaking. "They didn't even bring the papers. It was just a threat to show they were serious. They said they'd be back tomorrow with the deed transfer, and if I want to see Martha alive again, I'd better sign it." Zach's jaw tightened. "Did you recognize any of them?" "One of them works for the Silver Creek Ranch. That's Blackwood's place, about 20 miles north of here." "Never seen the others before." "We'll get her back," Zach promised, already reaching for his gun belt. "You said they're bringing the papers tomorrow," Fletcher nodded. "Noon, they said. Then we have until noon to find Mrs. Fletcher and bring her home safely." Zach turned to Olivia. "I need you to stay here with Mr. Fletcher. If Blackwood's men come looking, I'm coming with you," Olivia interrupted firmly. "Olivia, it's too dangerous," her eyes flashed. "Mrs. Fletcher is my friend. Besides, you don't know where Silver Creek Ranch is, but I do. I've delivered supplies there." Zach knew that determined look by now. There would be no talking her out of it. "Fine, but you follow my lead." They quickly gathered supplies, weapons, food, canteens of water, and saddled their horses. Fletcher wanted to come too, but Zach convinced him to stay in town. "If we don't make it back by noon, you'll need to be at your ranch to stall them," he explained. "And if the territorial marshal arrives, he'll need to know what's happening." Within an hour, they were riding north under a sky brilliant with stars. Olivia led the way, confident in her knowledge of the terrain even in darkness. They rode in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. It was near midnight when they reached a ridge overlooking the Silver Creek Ranch. Below them, the main house and several outbuildings were dark except for a single lamp burning in what appeared to be a bunkhouse. "What do you know about Blackwood?" Zach asked as they observed the ranch. "Not much," Olivia admitted. "He arrived about 6 months ago, bought the Silver Creek property from old man Jenkins, keeps to himself mostly. I've only seen him once when he came to town for supplies. Tall man, well-dressed, has a scar here." She traced a line from her left eye to her jaw. "How many men does he employ?" At least a dozen cowboys, from what I've heard, maybe more now. Zach considered their options. 2 against possibly 15 or more men were not good odds, especially when they didn't know where Mrs. Fletcher was being held. We need to get closer, he decided. See if we can figure out where they're keeping her. They left their horses in a stand of trees and approached the ranch on foot, moving carefully through the darkness. As they neared the bunkhouse, they could hear men's voices and occasional laughter. They don't sound very concerned about kidnapping a woman, Olivia whispered, her disgust evident. Zach's reply was cut short by the sound of a woman's cry coming from one of the smaller outbuildings, a storage shed about 50 yards from the main house. That's Martha, Olivia confirmed, her hand tightening on her rifle. Zach surveyed the area. The shed was somewhat isolated from the other buildings, which was good, but there was a lot of open ground to cross and probably a guard nearby. I'll create a diversion, he decided. Draw whoever's watching away from the shed. You get to Mrs. Fletcher and get her out. What kind of diversion? Zach nodded toward the barn. I think their horses could use some exercise, don't you? Despite the seriousness of the situation, Olivia smiled. Be careful. You too. They separated, with Zach circling around toward the barn while Olivia found a position with a clear view of the shed. Sure enough, as Zach got closer, he spotted a man sitting on a crate outside the shed door, rifle across his knees. Moving silently, Zach reached the back of the barn. The door was unlocked and he slipped inside. By the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls, he could see about 20 horses in stalls. Perfect. He found a coil of rope hanging on a post and carefully tied one end to the latch that held the main doors closed. Taking the other end, he moved down the row of stalls, unlatching each one. Then, with a quick prayer that this would work, he gave a shrill whistle and yanked on the rope. The barn doors flew open, and Zach slapped the nearest horse on the rump. The animal bolted for the opening, followed quickly by others. Within seconds, the entire herd was thundering out of the barn and into the ranch yard. Shouts of alarm erupted from the bunkhouse as cowboys tumbled out to see what was happening. The guard at the shed jumped up, momentarily forgetting his post as horses scattered in all directions. Zach slipped out the back of the barn and circled around, staying in the shadows. He could see Olivia already making her move, darting from her hiding place toward the shed while the guard was distracted. Everything was going according to plan until a shout went up from near the main house. Intruders. Check the prisoner. The guard spun around just as Olivia reached the shed. Zach didn't hesitate. He fired a shot that kicked up dirt at the man's feet, making him dive for cover. It gave Olivia the moment she needed to wrench open the shed door, but now the entire ranch was on alert. Cowboys were grabbing weapons and lanterns were being lit. Zach ran toward the shed, firing occasionally to keep heads down. Olivia emerged from the building supporting Mrs. Fletcher, who looked disheveled but otherwise unharmed. Zach reached them just as bullets began to fly in their direction. This way. He shouted, guiding them toward a water trough that offered some cover. We need to reach the trees. Mrs. Fletcher stumbled, nearly falling. I can't run, she gasped. They tied me too tight. My legs. Without a word, Zach scooped her up and carried her, while Olivia provided covering fire with her Winchester. They made it to the first line of trees just as mounted cowboys began to give chase. Our horses are just over that rise, Zach told them, setting Mrs. Fletcher down carefully. Can you make it that far? The older woman nodded determinedly. Just give me your arm. They hurried through the darkness, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. When they reached their horses, Zach helped Mrs. Fletcher onto his mount, then swung up behind her. Ride for the Fletcher Ranch, he told Olivia. I'll try to lead them away, then circle back. Zachariah, go, he urged. Get Mrs. Fletcher to safety. Reluctantly, Olivia spurred her horse into motion, with Mrs. Fletcher clinging to Zach as they galloped in another direction. As he'd hoped, most of the pursuers followed him, drawn by the more visible target. Zach led them on a chase through rough country, using his knowledge of the terrain to gradually lose them one by one. By the time the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, he had shaken the last of them and was making his way back toward the Fletcher Ranch. He arrived to find Olivia keeping watch from the porch, rifle ready. The relief on her face when she saw him was palpable. "Thank God," she said as he dismounted. "I was starting to worry." "Takes more than a few cowboys to catch me," he replied with a tired smile. "How's Mrs. Fletcher?" "Shaken but unharmed. She's resting now." They went inside to find Jacob Fletcher sitting at his wife's bedside, holding her hand as if he'd never let go again. "Mr. Dawson," he said, rising to his feet, "I don't know how to thank you and Miss Tate. You risked your lives for us." "No need for thanks," Zach assured him. "But we're not done yet. Blackwood's men will still come at noon, expecting you to sign over your land." "And I'll be waiting for them," Fletcher said grimly, his hand going to the shotgun leaning against the wall. "We'll all be waiting," Olivia corrected him, "but we need a plan." By the time the sun was fully up, word had spread through the nearby farms about Mrs. Fletcher's kidnapping and rescue. One by one, neighboring ranchers arrived at the Fletcher place, each carrying whatever weapons they owned. By mid-morning, nearly 20 men were gathered in the yard, united in their determination to stand against Blackwood's intimidation. "We've been letting these things happen for too long," one weather-beaten farmer declared. First the protection money in town, then the mysterious fires that drove the Hendersons out, now kidnapping. It stops today. Zach organized them into positions around the ranch with clear instructions: no shooting unless absolutely necessary. "We want Blackwood's men arrested, not killed," he explained. "That's the only way to ensure justice is properly served." As noon approached, tension mounted. Olivia took a position inside the house with Mrs. Fletcher, both women armed and ready. Zach stood on the porch with Fletcher, watching the road. Right on time, a cloud of dust appeared in the distance, growing larger as riders approached. Zach counted 6 men, with one he didn't recognize riding at the front, a tall, well-dressed man with a livid scar running down the left side of his face. "That's Blackwood," Fletcher confirmed in a low voice. The riders pulled up about 20 yards from the house, clearly surprised to see so many armed men waiting for them. "Fletcher," Blackwood called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "I see you've gathered some friends. That wasn't part of our arrangement." "There is no arrangement," Fletcher replied firmly. "You're not getting my land, not today, not ever." Blackwood's face darkened. "Perhaps you've forgotten that we have your wife." "No, you don't," Zach stepped forward. "Mrs. Fletcher is safe at home where she belongs." For the first time, Blackwood seemed to notice Zach. His eyes narrowed as he studied the former ranger. "And who might you be?" "Name's Zachariah Dawson, former Texas Ranger." A flicker of recognition crossed Blackwood's face. "Dawson, the one who's been causing trouble for my associates." "If by associates you mean Tucker and his gang of murderers, then yes." Blackwood's hand moved toward his gun, but Zach's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't," he advised. "You're outnumbered and surrounded. There are men with rifles behind you as well as in front." As if to emphasize his point, several of the farmers who had positioned themselves in the trees behind the riders now made themselves visible, weapons trained on Blackwood's men. For a tense moment, it seemed Blackwood might still try to fight. Then slowly he raised his hands away from his weapon. "This isn't over, Dawson," he said coldly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I think I do," Zach replied. "A coward who sends others to do his dirty work. A man who threatens women and tries to steal what others have worked hard to build." Blackwood's face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, the sound of approaching riders drew everyone's attention. A group of mounted men in uniform came into view, led by a stern-faced individual with a U.S. Marshal's badge prominently displayed on his chest. "Perfect timing," Zach murmured as the lawman approached. "What's going on here?" the marshal demanded, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. "Marshal Davis," Zach greeted him with a nod. "Glad you got the telegrams. We've been having some trouble with Mr. Blackwood here and his employees." Over the next hour, Zach and Olivia, along with the Fletchers, explained everything that had happened: the extortion in town, the connection to Tucker's gang, and the kidnapping of Mrs. Fletcher. Other ranchers added their own stories of intimidation and sabotage. By the time they finished, Marshal Davis had heard enough. He placed Blackwood and his men under arrest, reading out a list of charges that ranged from extortion and kidnapping to conspiracy to commit murder. "You've done good work here, Dawson," Davis said as his deputies led the prisoners away. "The territorial governor will be pleased. Blackwood's been causing trouble across 3 territories." "Just doing what needed to be done," Zach replied. As the marshal's party departed with their prisoners, the gathered ranchers began to disperse as well, each stopping to thank Zach and Olivia before heading home. Soon, only the Fletchers remained. "You two saved our farm, our lives," Martha Fletcher said, her eyes bright with tears. "If there's ever anything we can do for you, just keep making those apple pies you're famous for," Olivia told her with a smile. "And know that you helped stop something much bigger than just a land grab. Blackwood's arrest will bring peace to a lot of people." On the ride back to Redemption, Zach and Olivia traveled side by side, tired but satisfied with the day's outcome. The afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light, giving everything a peaceful glow that matched their mood. "What will you do now?" Olivia asked, echoing the question she'd posed days earlier. "With Tucker's gang captured and Blackwood arrested, your work here is done." Zach was quiet for a long moment, considering. The pocket watch rested in his vest pocket, its weight familiar and comforting. He had accomplished what he set out to do, recovered his father's watch, and unexpectedly found justice for his death. But something had changed during his time in Redemption, or perhaps something had changed in him. "I've been thinking about that," he said finally. "This town needs a proper law enforcement officer, someone who won't hide in the saloon when trouble comes." Olivia glanced at him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Are you considering the job?" Marshal Davis mentioned they're looking for a new sheriff, someone with experience. "You'd be perfect," Olivia said. "The people here respect you already." Zach looked at her, taking in the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her posture. In the short time he'd known her, Olivia Tate had become important to him in a way he hadn't thought possible after Sarah's death. "There's another reason I'm considering staying," he admitted. "A very compelling reason." Olivia's cheeks colored slightly under his gaze, but she held his eyes. "And what might that be?" "I think you know." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Marshal Davis returned to Redemption with official papers appointing Zach as the new sheriff, complete with a shiny new badge that felt both familiar and strange after his years away from law enforcement. A new jail was constructed, sturdier than the previous one, with proper cells and an office that didn't double as the sheriff's living quarters. Zach found himself settling into the role as if he'd been meant for it all along. The townspeople, grateful for his role in bringing down Blackwood and Tucker's gang, were supportive and cooperative. Even the former sheriff, Miller, seemed relieved to return to his preferred occupation as the saloon's best customer. Through it all, Olivia was a constant presence, offering advice, support, and companionship. Their evening meals became a cherished ritual, a time when they could discuss the day's events and share pieces of themselves that they revealed to no one else. It was during one such evening, nearly a month after Blackwood's arrest, that Zach finally found the courage to speak what had been in his heart. "I received a letter today," he said as they sat on the small balcony outside Olivia's kitchen, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "From my sister in Texas. I wrote to her when I decided to stay here." "You have a sister?" Olivia asked, surprised. "You've never mentioned her before. Rebecca. She's 5 years younger than me. We drifted apart after Sarah died. I wasn't good company for anyone then." Olivia's hand found his on the railing. "And now I told her I've found a place I want to stay, a purpose. And someone who makes me remember what it's like to look forward to tomorrow." The look in Olivia's eyes was a mixture of hope and caution. "Zachariah, I know it hasn't been long," he continued, turning to face her fully. "And I know I still carry scars from the past, but being with you, it feels right, Olivia, in a way nothing has for a very long time." "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "But are you sure? Your grief for Sarah will always be a part of me," Zach finished for her. Just as your uncle's death will always be a part of you, but Sarah would want me to be happy. She was that kind of person, and when I'm with you, I remember what happiness feels like." Olivia's eyes glistened with tears. "What are you saying exactly?" Zach took both her hands in his. "I'm saying I love you, Olivia Tate. I didn't expect to find love again, certainly not in a dusty little town in the middle of nowhere. But here you are, and here I am, and I don't want to waste another day not telling you how I feel." A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek as she smiled. "I love you too, Zachariah. I think I started falling for you the moment you tipped your hat to me after that gunfight." Zach laughed, remembering their first meeting. "You were quite impressive with that Winchester, and you were quite impressive diving behind that water trough." Their laughter faded into a moment of quiet understanding. Then, slowly, Zach leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, filled with promise and the acknowledgement of all they had already shared and all that lay ahead. When they parted, Olivia's eyes were bright with emotion. "So what happens now, Sheriff Dawson?" "Well, Miss Tate, I was thinking we might court properly. Dinners, dances, Sunday walks, all the things regular folks do when they're not chasing outlaws or foiling kidnapping attempts." "That sounds wonderful," Olivia agreed. "Though I suspect life with you will never be entirely without excitement." Zach smiled, knowing she was right. The West was still wild, still full of dangers and challenges, but for the first time in years, he wasn't facing those challenges alone. The news of their courtship spread quickly through Redemption, met with approval and more than a few comments along the lines of "about time." Olivia continued to run the mercantile, expanding her inventory to meet the needs of the growing town. Zach settled into his role as sheriff, establishing regular patrols and working with neighboring communities to improve communication about potential threats. Their courtship progressed with a natural ease that surprised them both. They discovered shared interests in books and music, debated politics and territorial issues, and gradually learned the rhythms of each other's lives. Zach found himself looking forward to the simplest moments, watching Olivia inventory her store, sitting beside her in church on Sundays, riding together on the occasional picnic outside of town. 3 months after Blackwood's arrest, Zach received word that both he and Tucker's gang had been tried and convicted. Justice had been served, bringing a sense of closure not just for Zach but for the entire community that had suffered under their influence. That evening, he took Olivia to dinner at the newly opened hotel restaurant, the most elegant establishment Redemption had to offer. She wore a green dress that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes, and Zach found himself struggling to concentrate on anything else. "You're staring," Olivia observed, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Can't help it," Zach admitted. "You're beautiful." A blush colored her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "You clean up rather nicely yourself, Sheriff." After dinner, they walked through the quiet streets, Olivia's hand tucked into the crook of Zach's arm. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. "I received a telegram today," Zach told her as they strolled, "from Marshal Davis. He's been appointed to oversee law enforcement for the entire territory, and he wants me to train new deputies." Olivia looked up at him, her expression curious. "Will you accept?" I told him I would, as long as I can stay based in Redemption, no more traveling for months at a time. "That's wonderful, Zachariah," she said warmly. "You're a natural teacher. Those deputies will be fortunate to learn from you." They had reached the small garden behind the church, a peaceful spot where wildflowers bloomed even in the arid climate, thanks to the devoted care of the pastor's wife. Zach led Olivia to a bench beneath an old cottonwood tree, its leaves rustling gently in the evening breeze. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you," he said, suddenly feeling nervous in a way that facing armed outlaws had never made him feel. Olivia must have sensed his anxiety. She squeezed his hand encouragingly. "What is it?" Zach took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about the future, our future. When Sarah died, I never thought I'd want to build a life with someone again. The risk of that kind of loss seemed too great." "And now?" Olivia asked softly. "Now I understand that the greater risk would be not embracing the chance for happiness when it's right in front of me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Olivia Tate, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Olivia's eyes widened as Zach opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small, perfect diamond. "Zachariah, I know it hasn't been that long," he continued quickly, "and if you need more time, I understand, but I love you, Olivia. I want to build a life with you right here in Redemption." Tears glistened in Olivia's eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Zachariah Dawson." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had been made for her. When Zach kissed her, he felt as if everything in his life had been leading to this moment, this woman, this future that suddenly stretched before them full of promise. Word of their engagement spread through Redemption even faster than news of their courtship had. Congratulations poured in from all quarters, along with offers to help with wedding preparations. Martha Fletcher insisted on baking the cake, while Jacob offered the use of their ranch for the ceremony if they wanted a more picturesque setting than the town church. Zach was touched by the community's enthusiasm, another reminder of how much Redemption had become home in the relatively short time he'd been there. But no one's reaction meant more to him than the telegram that arrived from his sister in Texas. "Overjoyed at your news. Stop will arrive 2 weeks before wedding. Stop cannot wait to meet Olivia. Stop, your loving sister Rebecca." Olivia was equally excited to meet Rebecca, the last remaining member of Zach's family. "Tell me about her again," she requested as they sat on the balcony one evening, making plans for the wedding that would take place in the spring, just 2 months away. "She's stubborn, opinionated, and too clever for her own good," Zach said with affectionate exasperation. "Married a banker named Thomas about 8 years ago. They have 3 children now, 2 boys and a girl. She sounds wonderful," Olivia smiled. "I always wanted siblings growing up. It was just me and my parents, and then after they died, Uncle Edward. Having a sister will be a new experience." Zach took her hand, touched by her eager acceptance of his family. "She'll love you, how could she not?" As the wedding approached, Redemption faced its share of challenges. A particularly harsh winter storm isolated the town for nearly 2 weeks, testing Zach's abilities as sheriff as he organized food distribution and checked on outlying farms. Spring brought flooding along the creek that gave the town its name, requiring everyone to work together to prevent damage to homes and businesses. Through it all, Zach and Olivia's partnership only strengthened. They faced each challenge together, their different skills complementing each other perfectly. Where Zach was action-oriented and decisive, Olivia was thoughtful and strategic. Where she sometimes overthought problems, he provided clarity and direction. Rebecca arrived as promised, 2 weeks before the wedding. She was a female version of Zach, tall and dark-haired, with the same direct gaze and no-nonsense manner. Yet she squealed with delight when she embraced Olivia, declaring them instant sisters and launching into wedding preparations with enthusiasm that left both Zach and Olivia breathless. "Your sister is a force of nature," Olivia whispered to Zach after Rebecca had rearranged the entire seating plan for the wedding dinner in less than an hour. "Warned you," he replied with a grin, "but she means well." "I adore her," Olivia assured him, "and I can see so much of you in her. It makes me wish I could have met your parents." Zach's hand went to the pocket watch he still carried every day. "They would have loved you, especially my mother. She always said I needed someone who could match me thought for thought." The day of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful, with wildflowers dotting the hills around Redemption as if nature itself were celebrating with them. The ceremony was held in the town church, which was filled to capacity with friends and neighbors. Olivia wore a gown of ivory silk that Rebecca had helped her select, with a lace veil that had belonged to Zach's mother. As Olivia walked down the aisle toward him, Zach felt a sense of rightness so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. This was where he was meant to be with this woman, in this town that had given him a second chance at happiness. "Dearly beloved," the pastor began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed church. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Zachariah James Dawson and Olivia Tate in holy matrimony. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but spoken with deep personal meaning. When Zach slipped the gold band onto Olivia's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his heart sure. The kiss they shared as husband and wife was a promise, a beginning, a declaration of the life they would build together. The celebration that followed was the largest Redemption had seen in years. Tables were set up in the town square, laden with food contributed by nearly every household. Music from fiddles and guitars filled the air as people danced and toasted the new couple. Even Sheriff Miller, now happily retired, was seen tapping his foot in time to the music. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, Tucker's younger brother, Illy, approached Zach somewhat hesitantly. Unlike Jeb, Illy had never joined the gang, choosing instead to work as a stable hand at the livery. "Sheriff Dawson," he said, awkwardly twisting his hat in his hands. I wanted to congratulate you and Mrs. Dawson." "Thank you, Illy," Zach replied, sensing there was more the young man wanted to say, "and I wanted to give you this." Illy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Found it among some of Jeb's things that were sent back after. "Thought it might belong to you." Zach unwrapped the parcel to find a faded daguerreotype in a simple frame. It showed a young couple on their wedding day, his parents, looking impossibly young and happy. "It was in the same box as that watch you were looking for," Illy explained. "Jeb never knew I found it. I'm sorry for what my brother did to your family." Touched by the gesture, Zach placed a hand on Illy's shoulder. "You're not responsible for your brother's actions, Illy. Thank you for returning this. It means a lot." When Illy had moved away, Olivia came to Zach's side. "What was that about?" Wordlessly, Zach handed her the photograph. Olivia studied it, then looked up at him with understanding in her eyes. "Your parents," Zach nodded. "On their wedding day, I didn't even know this picture existed. My father must have been carrying it in his saddlebags when he was killed." Olivia slipped her arm through his. "Now you have one more piece of them to keep." As the celebration continued around them, Zach felt a sense of completion. The past would always be part of him, his parents, Sarah, the child they had lost, but it no longer defined him. The future stretched before him, bright with promise and the love of the remarkable woman by his side. Later that night, as they stood on the porch of the small house they had purchased at the edge of town, Zach swept Olivia into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Dawson," he said, his voice husky with emotion. Olivia's arms encircled his neck, her eyes shining with happiness. "It's not the house that makes it home, Zachariah. It's being with you." The years that followed brought changes to both Redemption and the Dawsons. The town grew as the railroad finally reached them, bringing new settlers, businesses, and opportunities. Zach's reputation as sheriff spread throughout the territory, earning him offers of more prestigious positions, all of which he declined. Redemption was home, and nothing could tempt him away from the life he had built there. Olivia expanded the mercantile, adding a bookshop section that became a gathering place for the town's more educated citizens. She started a small school for the youngest children, sharing her love of learning with a new generation. When the town finally built a proper schoolhouse, she was the natural choice for headmistress, a position she accepted with the condition that she could continue to oversee the mercantile as well. Their greatest joy came with the birth of their first child, a son they named James Edward after both their fathers. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Rebecca, named for the important women in their lives. The children grew strong and healthy, surrounded by love and the tight-knit community of Redemption. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zach surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco, leaving the children in Rebecca's capable hands for 2 weeks. It was Olivia's first visit to a major city since leaving Boston, and she delighted in the theaters, restaurants, and bookshops that reminded her of her former life. "You ever miss it?" Zach asked as they strolled arm in arm along the busy waterfront. "The city, the culture, all of this." Olivia considered the question seriously. I miss certain aspects of it, the libraries, the concerts, the constant exchange of ideas, but not enough to trade what we have in redemption. And what's that? Zach asked, curious about her perspective, community, purpose. The satisfaction of building something meaningful together. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the love that had only deepened over the years. And you, of course, I would choose you over any city in the world. Upon their return to redemption, they found the town buzzing with news. The territorial governor had visited during their absence and announced that redemption was being considered as the site for a new county courthouse. It would mean more growth, more responsibility, and more prominence for the once struggling town. They want you to be the county sheriff when it happens, Mayor Thompson told Zach excitedly. Governor said there's no man he trusts more to establish proper law enforcement for the entire county. The prospect of expanded responsibilities gave Zach pause. It would mean more travel, more time away from home, but also more deputies to train, more opportunity to shape how justice is served in the territory, Olivia pointed out when they discussed it that evening. You've always wanted to make a difference, Zachariah. This is your chance to do it on a larger scale. Her faith in him, as always, gave Zach the confidence to accept the challenge. When the courthouse was completed a year later, he was sworn in as the first county sheriff with 4 deputies under his command. The 10th anniversary of their wedding coincided with Arizona's preparations for statehood. Redemption, now a thriving town of nearly 2,000 people, hosted a celebration that combined patriotic fervor with personal commemoration of the Dawsons' marriage. During the festivities, 14-year-old James and 12-year-old Sarah presented their parents with a handmade album containing photographs and mementos from their years together. The final page held a new family portrait, taken just a week earlier, showing the 4 of them outside the mercantile that had been the starting point of their journey together. "We're very proud of you both," Sarah declared, her mother's intelligence and her father's directness evident in her young face. "As we are of you," Olivia replied, embracing her children. Later that evening, as Zach and Olivia shared a quiet moment away from the celebration, he reflected on the path that had brought them to this point. "When I rode into redemption 15 years ago, I was a broken man chasing ghosts," he said, holding Olivia's hand as they sat on the porch of their home. "I never imagined I'd find a future here, let alone such happiness." "Life has a way of surprising us," Olivia agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "When Uncle Edward left me the mercantile, I thought I was giving up everything I knew to honor his memory. Instead, I found everything I never knew I wanted." Zach's arm tightened around her. "Remember that day when Tucker's men cornered me in the street? They were jeering, saying I'd die alone out there. And you told them, not while she's beside me." "I'll never be alone," Olivia finished, remembering the moment that had come several weeks into their courtship, when some of Tucker's remaining associates had tried to ambush Zach in revenge. "I meant it then, and I mean it even more now," Zach said, his voice deep with emotion. "You've given me a life I never thought possible, Olivia, a family, a home, a purpose beyond just survival." "And you've given me the same," she replied softly. "We built this life together, Zachariah. Every day, every challenge, every joy, we've shared it all." From inside the house came the sound of their children's laughter as they played with the new puppy that had been Zach's anniversary gift to the family. The streets of Redemption, now properly paved and lined with businesses and homes, stretched before them, a testament to how much had changed in 15 years. But the greatest change had been within themselves. 2 people who had lost their families had created a new one. A drifting former lawman had found his true calling. A Boston schoolteacher had discovered her frontier strength. Together, they had transformed grief and solitude into love and community. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Zach pulled Olivia close, grateful beyond words for the journey they had shared and the years that still lay ahead. In each other, they had found not just love, but the promise that neither would ever truly be alone again.